This is a relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jesperson.
On this Friday, the 9th of September, we welcome you to Real Talk. Ryan Jesperson here with John Hicks.
Hello.
Looking forward to this episode. In just a few moments, Supriya Dwivedi joins us in her regular Friday spot, and then the return of the group chat roundtable. This has always been popular with Real Talkers. These are members of a real group chat that I participate in. Not all of the members, but we pick and choose from that roster. Today it'll be Harman Kandola, Katherine O'Neill, and Jenny Adams. We're going to talk about, obviously, the passing of Queen Elizabeth II, who through yesterday's episode, we were, can I say, on alert, on watch, after the royal family had confirmed that there were medical issues and that the Queen's family, the royal family, were gathering by her side at Balmoral. The royal family announcing just hours after we recorded yesterday's episode that she had, in fact, passed at age 96. We'll be talking about her legacy today, as well as other stories that are making news across the country. John, it's pretty rare that when we're working through the day, off air, so to speak, working on the next day's show, pushing out the elements, the promotional clips, getting everything ready for the podcast to go out, that we have news on the 24-hour channels, on the monitors in studio with the sound fully up, listening to coverage. It's a remarkable day. I can think back to January 6th, the siege in the Capitol. We had the volume full up. Another one yesterday, watching coverage of the Queen. Where was your head at?
Well, I thought this one was strange because, the news is so real time nowadays. Even like the insiders, like the political pundits and the people who they all knew. They were talking about the funeral and everything before the family even gathered yesterday around her side. So I think that's just something very unique about nowadays. Yeah. Whereas we might have not heard till hours after or whatever. We pretty much knew she was going to pass away any minute yesterday. So it was very surreal. Yeah.
You had that kind of a feel when they confirmed that she was under medical supervision, a public statement like that.
Very strange.
But it was just a few days ago, you remember, when she accepted the resignation of Prime Minister Boris Johnson. That was her 14th Prime Minister, the 14th Prime Minister under her reign. And then, of course, welcomed the 15th, Liz Truss. The photos, though, of when the Queen met with new Prime Minister Liz Truss, people had commented on how the Queen was looking particularly frail, but still
she was,
showing up for duty like she did for more than 70 years. Now, of course, not everyone was celebrating the legacy of the Queen yesterday, based on your perspective, based on what part of the world you're from, based on your family's background, perhaps your ethnicity or your convictions. People were making comments, of course, around the British history of colonialism. People were talking about problems within the royal family, including Prince Andrew recently, and you saw some of that commentary online. We welcome your comments today. Where's your head at with this? I know many people will be mourning the loss of Queen Elizabeth II because they're really, that's the only monarch that they've ever known. She has been the Queen of Canada for most Canadians' entire lives. There's a sense of familiarity. There's a fondness. We'll be looking to our live chat today. We'll be hitting up our inbox, talk at ryanjesperson.com. That's where you can get us. And of course, our hashtag RealTalkRJ as well. Supriya Dwivedi in just a moment. I want to remind you that pretty soon you're going to be running out of time to get your hands on a potential shot at life-changing luxury. That's right, 30 years of life-changing wins with the Covenant Foundation Lottery. For over 160 years, Covenant Health's been making a big difference for patients and loved ones, in particular at the Misericordia and Grey Nuns Hospital. They need your support to continue to offer those services, and you can do it in a way that sets you up to, well, snag the keys to a $2.2 million dream home. You can check out the details, tour the home itself at covenantfoundationlottery.ca. This beauty, built by Hillview Master Builder, comes with a 3-car garage, a backyard patio, a botanical room, 4 bedrooms, 5 bathrooms, fully furnished, ready to move in. You can find out more about this year's prizes. Of course, there's way more than just the dream home. CovenantFoundationLottery.ca or 1-888-944-2774.
Botanical room.
keep wondering about that botanical room.
Yeah.
You just fill it with pot plants, but that's not what the Covenant Foundation folks wanted. You do whatever you want in your botanical room. I know what I'd be doing with mine. Create a little distance before the next ad read. And now, Grand Dog Essentials. Yesterday, you know what? Delivered right to our door, John. Delivered right to our door. The raw quality dog food that our Moses and Monroe both enjoy. Mm-hmm. You know, they deliver on a weekly basis. Calgary, Edmonton, and they've just welcomed on a new team member that's going to be handling their central Alberta deliveries. Let me tell you firsthand, folks, quality raw dog food makes an incredible difference in your dog's health. Could be joints and mobility. Could be their digestive health, their guts. It could be just how their coat looks. You will see the difference, and you might pay less than what you're paying right now for that lousy kibble. Check them out online at granddog.ca. The promo code REALTALK gets you 10% off your first order delivered right to your door. Kubi Energy chatted with the team just yesterday. I said, how are things going with this $40,000 interest-free loan from the feds? Whoa! They are pedal to the metal, which means A, they're always hiring. You can check out their careers link at kubienergy.ca. And B, they're ready to rock as soon as you are. Don't worry about the paperwork. Don't worry about doing the research on this grant, on this loan from the feds. They do it all for you. $40,000 interest-free to get solar panels up on your roof. The quote is free, of course, at kubienergy.ca. Don't forget, we want to hear your good news stories, too. Positive reflections every Monday on the show, presented by our friends at Kubi Energy. And I told you about my tour of the Apex automation facilities earlier this week. We're going to start showing you photos and videos from behind the scenes next week. Really neat to see their team in action. In particular, they were working on a software to control the entire operation of a SAG-D facility. That's just one of the things they do. Mining, breweries, you name it. If it can be automated, Apex Automation can do it. With their team, the best in the world. John, I met two of their new employees. They had just welcomed them in from China. Mm-hmm. These guys are working on algorithms for a potash mine automation. Yeah. Mind-blowing stuff. If you're an engineer looking for a new challenge, you want to be appreciated in your workplace, why not look into working for Apex Automation? You can find them online under the sponsors tab on our website. Well, every Friday, it's our absolute pleasure, obviously, to check in, with apologies to everybody else, our favorite. Supriya Dwivedi joins us in this time slot, in addition to every Wednesday when we hang out seriously with Supriya and Ryan, our new podcast project together. Good morning, my friend.
Good morning.
Yeah, yesterday, kind of to state the obvious, an unusual day, wall-to-wall news coverage on every station on planet Earth. And social media was the exact same thing. Was your timeline like mine, just QE2 content all the way through?
All the way through. And, starting from basically the moment that it was reported that she was unwell and that the family was, headed over there. There's a lot of obviously social media speculation, but the news cycle, it, kind of wrote itself more or less with obits and obviously these nice memories that other world leaders had of her and coming forward with them, which I thought was, nice, as well as the, I think the discourse, if you will allow me to call it that, that I think we were all sort of expecting, right? When it comes to the monarchy and the British Empire and what that means for colonialism. And, I don't know, it's an interesting sort of way that it plays out on social media, particularly on Twitter, because it's a space where like nuance goes to die and you have to fall into one camp right away and you can't be anywhere in between.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw. There were those tweets and those expressions, and even I was seeing on some of the live news coverage, in particular on the BBC, some Britons interviewed. One gal said, "To be honest, I'm not the biggest fan of the royal family," and the reporter doing the live hit, I think, somewhat taken aback. Says, "Well, how come?" And she goes, "Well, and I think she understated it very effectively. She said, the whole colonialism thing." And then she said, and of note, I don't know if this is tacky to say, but she was white. I thought, and then she also says, and some of the problems within the family, like most recently Prince Andrew. And then the journalist, the live reporter goes, "Fair enough," and just kind of backs away. And he's like, "And then now we have two Americans at a coffee shop," and just kind of went right into the next one. I saw some tweets. One said, "The Queen is dead, Yemen lives." and others have expressed those sentiments. How do you feel? Like, honestly, we call the show Real Talk. Is it too soon? Is it fair commentary? Does everybody need to toughen up a little bit and expect these types of conversations? How are you wrapping your mind around it?
I mean, I don't think it's too soon when we're talking about a world figure, right?
Sure.
I don't know. It's different than it's not like your neighbor that died unexpectedly down the street and you're at the wake or at the funeral and you're like bad mouthing the neighbor in front of the kids or, in front of the wife. Like that's too soon. But I think there's a different sort of standards, or there should be at least a different set of standards when we're talking about public figures. And I don't know, like where I stand, like I think that it's genuinely nice and moving to see the outpouring of sorrow and grief and however you want to qualify it. I think because everything sucks generally, right? It's nice to have these sorts of collective moments. But, from my own perspective, I mean, I am a small R Republican myself. I think the monarchy is an utterly antiquated institution. And I don't know if any sort of modern civil society should really be striving to keep the monarchy alive, right? And you couple that with the horrors and the atrocities that have been committed by the British Empire, and it's like, yeah, okay, not great, right? But having said that, I fully concede that I don't really have a better alternative for our own form of government, Canada being a constitutional monarchy. And it's we have it pretty good here, particularly if you compare us to other places like the US that are republics and, have seen their democracy take quite a hit in recent years.
Yeah, I'm curious to further pursue that line. I was reading a tweet from a lawyer in Alberta just the other day, and he says, what a strange occurrence. He walked into court. He says, yesterday I walked in to the Court of Queen's Bench and I walked out of the Court of King's Bench. And Canadians and those in the Commonwealth and those around the world will, I suppose, adjust and get used to referring to King Charles III.
Sounds weird.
It still does sound weird. And people are wondering, will he abdicate within a certain number of years to clear the throne for King William? And maybe getting ahead of ourselves here. There was an affinity or an affection, a connection that many people felt to the Queen. And it's potentially not fair to make the comparison because Charles hasn't walked in those shoes, but it's probably safe to say that Charles is less likable, that people feel less of a like.
Why are you being so diplomatic about
why
this?
am I?
Yeah.
Well, like people are still
likable.
pissed off about Princess Diana. The Queen had to go on the record and talk about how what's she called now? Not the Queen's consort or something, but Camilla. Mm-hmm. Basically, the Queen went on the record. Elizabeth did and said that Camilla would be an appropriate choice. She had to, I feel like, spell that out before her passing. You wonder if people in Canada, Australia, New Zealand, other Commonwealth nations, let alone Britain's, might. If their feelings about the monarchy might evolve or change or progress with Charles now sitting there.
And that's a really interesting sort of evolution that might take place. And we had hypothetical polling to this effect in Canada to suggest that, Canadians are kind of like meh on the monarchy, but have very high opinion of the Queen, the former Queen now, I should say. And that doesn't extend to Charles in particular. So it will be interesting. And, things aren't great right now in the UK when it comes to soaring energy prices, the economy not being great. So I don't know how Charles is going to be received, presiding over the throne. So that'll be interesting. I don't know. And just like the Queen herself, right? At least in terms of what is arguably her highly, managed public persona. She did seem like a badass, right? And like stories that are being told of her from world leaders. Like there's one Twitter thread by Catherine Clark, who's, former Prime Minister Joe Clark's daughter. She was telling the story on Twitter of once she had met the Queen, and the Queen just comes across as like funny, caring, humble, and just like a good sport about it. And it's I think those stories are nice and endearing and shed a light, but I don't know. It's like, it's weird, this whole, wow, it's too soon, because it's like, well, what, like, what's too soon? Like, can you really not understand why Indians or Kenyans or the Irish might not be the biggest fans of the monarchy or the empire? Like, it's just a very weird sort of conversation that I think we're having. And full disclosure, like, my own grandfather came here from India. He was born in pre-partition India and refused to become a Canadian citizen, even though he had been here since the 70s and spent his entire life as a permanent resident, because he just couldn't bring himself to pledge loyalty to the Queen and all of her heirs and successors in perpetuity.
Wow. Yeah. Narendra Modi, of course, yesterday commenting on how he would never forget the Queen's warmth and kindness. I don't know if that's a surprise. I don't know if you expect global leaders
I don't think that's
to come
surprise.
out and
Yeah, I
take
don't think
strong
global leaders are
positions,
going to,
but
like,
I think citizens would have stronger feelings, or at least more public expressions of their feelings.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I think to the point that I think both of us are trying to make is that the Queen herself also embodied something that seemed to be somewhat separate from the monarchy as an institution, or the British Empire in and of itself. Yeah,
absolutely. On our live chat, Tracy says Queen Elizabeth II was a very strong woman. She kept up with news around the world personally. She appeared to be so rocked or impacted by the recent stabbings in Saskatchewan, and the flooding in Pakistan, as an example. Erica says, I think you can mourn the Queen's death while also recognizing the wounds and scars of colonialism are still not healed. It doesn't have to be one or the other. I appreciate that perspective. Or
paid for. Not only are they not healed, but they're not paid for, right? Like, we're talking about the literal accumulation of wealth that was like developed via looting and plundering of other nations, right? Like, I don't know.
That's a fair point. I saw a lot of people talking about land back yesterday. Obviously, like you mentioned, Ireland, Irish Twitter yesterday was wild. Jillian says that, the royal family's problem is that everybody in that family fell short of the standard that the Queen set. And there was an opportunity to modernize with Harry and Meghan, but the UK tabloids absolutely destroyed her, which is fair comment as well. Let's transition. I've been wanting to talk to you about the Saskatchewan tragedy. Obviously, things have changed over the past couple of days. The fugitive, Miles Sanderson, taken into police custody and then died in police custody. There's speculation about what happened. It's not been confirmed by police. But if you're watching this on YouTube, or you can obviously reference what I'm sure you've seen elsewhere, a photo, an image of RCMP officers taking him into custody after his stolen Chevy Avalanche went off the road on a Saskatchewan highway. It's alleged, it's been suggested that he took a mouthful of pills while still in the vehicle and then went into cardiac arrest after. That's not been confirmed by the RCMP. As a matter of fact, the RCMP hasn't said much aside from simply confirming that he died. This is RCMP commanding officer in Saskatchewan. She's assistant commissioner. This is Rhonda Blackmore a couple of days ago.
Police officers surrounded the vehicle and through verbal identification confirmed the identity of the driver to be Miles Sanderson. He was arrested by police and taken into custody. A knife was located inside the vehicle. The emergency alert was canceled at 3:50 p.m. once his identity was confirmed and he had been taken into police custody. Shortly after his arrest, he went into medical distress. Nearby, EMS were called by police to attend the scene, and he was transported to a hospital in Saskatoon. He was pronounced deceased at the hospital.
Okay, so the Serious Incident Response Team is conducting an investigation, as they do every time there's a death in police custody. What's top of mind for you on this story right now today?
Why do we accept such opaqueness, like opacity, right? Like, why do we accept these sorts of answers from the RCMP or from police forces more generally? Like, what does medical distress mean? Like, did he have previous injuries? Because that was part of the warnings or the speculation that he may have been injured, right? And would be looking for medical attention. So was it something that had happened previously and it just, ended up being a fatal condition or a mortal blow to something, right? Or like, to your point, because I did see that speculation of him popping a bunch of pills. Like, was it that led to cardiac arrest? Like, we should, and I realize that without an autopsy, they wouldn't necessarily be able to pinpoint whether or not it was a cardiac arrest or not, but like, was there an empty pill bottle that was found? Like, I don't understand. Like, we deserve answers, particularly the communities that have been affected, right? And I just think that the RCMP and police forces more generally in this country, especially if we're comparing ourselves to like the US or some other jurisdictions, just give non-answers all the time. And we're just like, okay, I guess. let's just keep, accepting this. And I don't know why we do.
Yeah, and I want to stress. I mean, I almost feel like I risk being irresponsible here when I talk about like did he or did he not take a handful of pills? Because like it's like this has been speculation suggested by people. There's no credible source that suggested that. We don't know. And the more that I bring it up and say speculation says this, it almost like sort of reiterates that speculation. Yeah. I don't want to do that. But I will say, to be fair, so let's say this is a hypothetical exercise. This is just you and me chatting. To be fair, to put yourself in a position as a police officer with adrenaline coursing through your veins, you're involved in a car chase with a fugitive that is allegedly responsible for the deaths of 10 or 11 people. Did he kill his brother? It sounds like he may have. We don't know yet. Responsible for the injuries, horrific injuries to nearly 20 other people. Endangering the public, the entire province, for that matter, the entire nation, locking their doors, wondering what's going on, keeping an eye out. I mean, the public sense of emergency was very evident, of course. And then you take this person into custody, and I sort of think like I understand many people have very valid and legitimate concerns about deaths in police custody for obvious reasons. Right? In particular, Indigenous people in Canada. We've heard of the Starlight Tours. We've heard of injustices, throughout our nation's history, including to present day. I recognize that for sure. But I also think, hypothetically, if somebody took a handful of pills or a whole bunch of fentanyl or something like that, your adrenaline's crazy. There's a car chase. He hits the dish. You get him into handcuffs. There's chaos everywhere. And then all of a sudden he goes into cardiac arrest because these pills kick in, hypothetically, speculating. Then, I sometimes, I don't know, and I'm not just trying to back the blue and like jump to the defense of police all the time, but I often think they're in situations that we as civilians can't even wrap our minds around and are making decisions like that. And I hope that somebody doesn't try to spin this as me absolving police of responsibility when it comes to citizens that are unarmed being shot in the back and things like that. I'm not talking about that. But in a situation like this, obviously there needs to be transparency. Obviously there needs to be a full investigation, starting with an autopsy. But at the same time, I look at a situation like this and I try to be reasonable in my understanding of, why didn't the police save his life? People are saying, keep in mind, it's the responsibility of the police to keep a suspect alive. For sure. But at the same time, in a chaotic situation like that, where you don't have all the information, I don't know what they're supposed to do. That's just where my head's
fair.
at.
Look, that's fair. And particularly if you're talking about like how could they potentially have saved him if it was, again, the speculated theory that we're kind of putting out there, if it was a pill type situation or something like that, right? But the person that's giving the presser shouldn't be one of the people that was on the scene, right? With the adrenaline coursing. The person giving the presser should have a clear head, should be able to answer questions from journalists, and should be able to give information beyond it being an issue of medical distress. Was it medical distress from the result of injuries? Was it the medical distress from, we don't know, because there was no clear indication or clear cause?
Right.
What type of medical distress was it? Like if somebody does end up seizing, is having a grand mal seizure for some whatever reason because of pills or something else, then you see that and you can say that like, we don't have details at this time. We're going to be conducting a full autopsy, a full coroner's inquest into, what happened here. What we can tell you is, and again, it's full speculation, like, right? But what we can tell you is like, there was like pills that were found, or there was injuries that were likely deeper than were anticipated. Just something. So it's not just like, well, medical distress. That's all we have here. See you later, folks.
Yeah, Sharon's watching us right now. She says he obviously shouldn't have even been out on the streets. What does the parole board have to say about this? I was thinking about this yesterday, putting together some elements for your and my conversation, and as I'm scrolling through my social media at the same time, I see a release out of British Columbia. Police notifying the public that a pedophile, a repeated child sex offender is being released again. And basically my paraphrase of the release is this guy's out after convictions of child luring, child pornography, sexual assault, invitation to touching, etc. A long list, like the scum of the scum, like the worst. And they say, and heads up to the public, he's being released, and we believe that there's a high likelihood that he will reoffend. Perfect. It's like a zookeeper just letting the city know we're opening up the cage for the lions and heads up everybody because they're hungry. That's what it feels like, and I'm not trying to be funny. You wrapping your head around this, obviously I would suspect that this will kickstart yet another conversation among Canadians around campfire circles this weekend about how our parole board operates and our entire judicial system and whether or not people can be rehabilitated and when a dangerous offender application needs to be levied. And in this circumstance, I think that would have been fair. Is this a thought exercise you've been going through the past couple of days?
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's a valuable conversation that we should be having about the criminal justice system more generally. But why was this guy released if he's likely to reoffend? Isn't that one of the main things that you take into consideration, is if he poses a danger to the public? I'm grossly
under presenting the parole board's findings because it's not just like a shrug. It's not a shoulder shrug. But basically, he convinced them. I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but based on what I read, he convinced them that the majority of his outbursts, violence, and problems were due to drug and alcohol use, and he believed that he could live clean. And then they basically said that if you can live sober, we believe that you can contribute to society. And that seemed to kind of be it. And I'm oversimplifying the process, but I don't know. I mean, it's easy now to armchair quarterback this, but 59, what was it, almost 60 convictions, not charges, 60 criminal convictions in 20 years?
I was actually talking about the BC pedophile that you were referring to.
Oh, pardon me.
The likelihood to reoffend. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, it's like, I think we should be having these conversations, to your point, and I think we should be talking about the supports also. Yeah. Like, if the goal is to reintegrate and to rehabilitate people, you can't just, be like, okay, well, good luck, I guess, and not be giving them things that they need to stay clean, and to stay sober, and to, not reoffend. They need the supports that are there. And right now we don't have them.
Before we let you go, Supriya, it's always such a pleasure to chat with you. Everybody knows you're born and raised in Montreal, living in Ontario now, but of course you know Quebec very well. An election underway. Quebec's premier, or I guess I'd say now party leader, Francois Legault, got himself in a bit of a tough situation, didn't he? Talking about immigration a couple of days ago. I want to ask you about this. He's walked it back. He was asked about what he considered to be challenges in integrating immigrants into Quebec. He said that Quebecers have specific values, and that they're peaceful, and that they don't like extremists or violence. And of course, there was outrage around the comments, and Francois Legault responding to those just a short time ago. Here he is.
We weren't talking only about Quebec, but there were some questions about other provinces and other countries. And what I said is that in any country or state, there's a challenge of integration to the values and to the language. So when questions were asked about which values, I shouldn't have answered that, because some people made a bad link between that and our immigrants. In Quebec, our challenge is really about the language, not about the values.
Do you buy it?
No. I mean, I don't buy, first of all, what a non-apology. Some people made the link.
Some people misunderstand me, yeah.
Dude, it's your own words, first of all. And if it is just about the language, then why Bill 21? Why, you know what I mean? That's just, it's all bullshit. And I think it's, again, I don't want to beat a dead horse here. And it's not as though the rest of Canada doesn't have issues with xenophobia or racism, right? Like police carding in Toronto or Ottawa, use of force by police, right? Institutional anti-Black racism, the amount of, or the overproportion, overrepresentation of Indigenous kids that are, snatched from their families by the state. These are all examples of the rest of Canada's xenophobia and institutional racism. But there's no way in any other province you would have a premier or former, I guess, party leader of a major provincial party that is on track to wallop the other parties in terms of seat count and get away with the kind of rhetoric that Legault, and, it's not just Legault, but very many other parties, mainstream parties in Quebec tends to get away with. And it's I don't know why we tiptoe around it, but the xenophobia and the racism in Quebec is very specific. And I don't know how else to say this, because every time I do say this, it gets people's back up against a wall, and I get it. But it's I don't know, it's a lot. It is different. It's I don't know if it's like more polite racism versus more overt racism, or like how I would qualify it, but it's constantly having to justify your existence as like your right to be a Quebecer, as like a visible minority, or as somebody who's not primarily Francophone. And I mean, like, both my husband and I speak fluent French. I went to law school in French. I grew up in a French Canadian, predominantly French Canadian town of Granby. And it's like, we both speak French, but we both, we're always having to prove our Quebecness, and we don't do that in Ontario. You don't do that in Toronto. Like, it's just very different. And
you could have a job in the public sector and wear religious garb, religious paraphernalia in Ontario, which you can't in Quebec. Which I think the context here, like even the context just of Bill 21, makes this so much more of a bigger, more meaningful conversation. Makes the comments that much more significant than they would coming from any other Canadian premier.
Yeah, of course. And it's like, we just pretend like it's not really an issue, or I don't know, we like tend to sweep it away, or we finger wag at times, but then, and it's just like, it's just exhausting. The whole thing is exhausting. Supriya
Dwivedi is the better half of Seriously with Supriya and Ryan. You can catch it every Wednesday, everywhere you get your podcasts. And of course, you can subscribe on YouTube as well. Have an amazing weekend, my friend. It's always good to talk to you.
You too, Ryan.
I always feel like my perspective is deepened after we talk to Supriya. Hawes says, in a system based on restorative justice, mistakes are inevitable, but this failure is over the top bad. Talking about the release of Miles Sanderson. Dwayne says, catch and release is good for fish, not for dangerous criminals. Tracy wonders, why on earth did the parole board make that decision? And by the way, and Tracy makes an important point, says he was unlawfully at large since May. Were there any warnings given to the community? That's right, he had stopped checking in with his parole officer back in the spring. There was he was to regularly report his intimate relationships, regularly check in. There were other conditions to his release, and he was just out. Donna references a story in our hometown of Edmonton. She's absolutely right. Says that man that killed those two men in Chinatown in Edmonton was another that should not have been left to his own devices while waiting for his next court date. It's true. That was a horrific story. You remember that out of Alberta Beach? We talked to the mayor of Alberta Beach about it. That was a remarkable interview. I felt like that interview kind of flew under the radar. That was a man that had been picked up by RCMP, taken to Edmonton, and just essentially left, which was not supposed to be the case, to say the least. Went on and bludgeoned two innocent men to death. I don't know if I even had to say innocent there, but two men to death. Just beat them to death. You can let us know what you think about what you're hearing here on the show. Brenda referencing Vince Lee and the Greyhound bus incident, that horrific incident in Manitoba. I recognize there are 40 million people in Canada, and these are sort of like, incidents that happen every few years, and statistically speaking, our lives are not likely to be personally shattered or interrupted by dangerous criminals. But tell that to the families of the people whose lives were. People whose lives were snuffed out, entire communities in mourning. Really moving development in the James Smith Cree Nation yesterday. Did you see this on the national news stations? A wake held for Miles Sanderson, the accused in all of this. And his partner, she showed up. Obviously, I can't even wrap my mind around where she must be at. Based on reports, I mean, imagine what her life must have been like up till this point. The domestic violence, the outbursts, these children I talked about yesterday. She said she expected no one to show up for obvious reasons. The hall was packed with people, community members there to support her, people bringing meals and food and showing their support. It's really, these things have so much nuance to them. I'm looking forward to getting into this with our group chat roundtable in just a second. These are personal friends of mine. These are people who bring wisdom and perspective to the table. And you know what? These are three people that we can go to for conversations that aren't easy and that aren't simple. And will make it worth your time to tune in as well. That's coming up in less than 2 minutes. I want to let you know that these conversations happen because we have amazing partners like the teams at Sherwood and St. Albert Dodge that invite you to check out the 2022 Jeep Wagoneer. This is Jeep's re-entry into the luxury class, the Grand Wagoneer, going head-to-head with the Navigators and the Escalades. Everybody that you talk to that's test-driven a Grand Wagoneer is raving about it. There's that Dodge Durango, too, that's always been a popular part of that Dodge lineup. You'll find the best selection in the province at St. Albert and Sherwood Dodge. You can shop them online or in person. And you let them know that Real Talk sent you. They'll take care of you. We guarantee it. Our friends at Friesen Brothers want to let you know that it is Hatch chili season right now. If you've never tried a Hatch chili, they're really beautiful. If you're one that grills vegetables, Hatch chilies have a really remarkable taste to them, remarkable flavor, but their growing season is very limited. You can only get them a couple of weeks every year. You'll find them at the 16 Friesen Brothers across the province of Alberta. And don't forget, a medieval feast, all you can eat, coming up in a couple of weeks, less than that, at Friesen Brothers, September 17th and 18th. You can find all the details at friesen.com. Friesen Brothers is Alberta grown and Alberta owned. Our friends at Eden Landscaping are wrapping up, not quite done yet, but wrapping up another successful season, bringing outdoor spaces to life. Through the fall and winter months, they'll be meeting with their new clients, getting set to hit the ground running in the spring. The best part about working with Eden Landscaping is you don't have to hire a general contractor. You don't have to hire a landscape architect. You don't have to hire somebody to come and clean up the mess after the construction crew leaves. From start to finish, Eden Landscaping does a top shelf job. It's why they build their business on referrals and return customers. You know, some of their customers have moved 2, 3, 4 times and hired Eden to bring the new space to life every single time. You can check them out online at landscapeedmonton.ca. That's where you can get the ball rolling on your landscape design. And at Westworld Computers, they want to remind you that it's a perfect time to upgrade your family's technology. Why? Well, because they're overstocked. Yeah, that's right. They've got a sale going on right now. The overstock sale. When you're purchasing MacBooks, you can get the details at westworld.ca. In particular, M1 MacBook Airs and MacBook Pros. Now, this weekend, Saturday and Sunday, they're extending their hours to give you extra time after the Labor Day long weekend to get your back to school and back to work savings in. We'll have more to tell you about events coming up this month with Westworld Computers, your Apple experts at westworld.ca. Well, the group chat roundtable, we check in every 6 months or so. These are personal friends of mine, people whose perspectives I trust and respect. We don't always agree, but we do always get along. Harman Kandola is a lawyer and a VP of the World Sikh Organization. Katherine O'Neill is CEO of the YWCA of Edmonton, former journalist with the Globe and Mail. And Jenny Adams is principal of the Adams Agency. It's great to see the three of you. Thanks for making time for us. I want to talk to you about the events, the tragedy that occurred in Saskatchewan. I want to talk to you about politics and leadership races. But of course, the global lead story for the next 2 weeks is going to be the death of Queen Elizabeth II. Katherine, in your journalism career, I don't know the answer to this. Did you ever cover a Queen's visit, or did you ever have any professional interactions with the Queen?
Yeah, I did. In 2005, the Queen came to Alberta and Western Alberta, and so I was part of the royal tour. So I got to do that coverage, and it was fascinating because she also brought the British press with her as well, and you got to see that whole machine in action. And so it was quite interesting. And I also lived in England when I was in my early 20s, and I lived in London and saw the Queen just out and about around London. So yeah, it was definitely an interesting to watch the Queen from a personal perspective and a professional perspective.
Do you remember like the tone of your reporting? Was there anything that particularly stuck with you or something you remember to this day, nearly 20 years later?
Oh, the monarchy, the Queen, very complicated. I come from British, Irish, Scottish roots. So I grew up always hearing good and bad things about the monarchy and the Queen. And so when I became a journalist, that you bring that perspective with you. And so when she did come to Canada in 2005, she was coming right after the Mayerthorpe tragedy. So that was when the 4 Mounties were murdered in Mayerthorpe by a single gunman. And so I do remember, and I don't remember if you were on that world tour as well, Brian, but
I wasn't.
she did. talk a lot about that tragedy and kind of always could take the pulse of anywhere she was going. She read the room very carefully, no matter where she was in the world. And I think that is a huge part of her legacy and why people are having an outpouring, good and bad, about who she was and her legacy.
Harman, how about you? How are you wrapping your mind around this whole thing?
Well, I don't know if I agree that she always knew how to read a room. Decades ago, she was in India, and there was an expectation that she would apologize for the massacres committed by the monarchy in India. And she had an opportunity to apologize for what happened at Jallianwala Bagh in Amritsar, where British troops massacred hundreds of people in broad daylight as they were peacefully protesting. And she took that opportunity to remind people that we need to find the good, find a way forward. And she decided that she didn't want to apologize. And so while I have sympathies for those mourning, in the words of Jagmeet Singh, a family has lost an elder, and our sympathies to them. Every time I looked at her crown, I was reminded that her power and her authority were derived from the subjugation and exploitation of so many different people. And so while, I'm respectful to those who are mourning, I also don't want to deny the experience of those who've been oppressed, who are being oppressed. And so, I spent a lot of time yesterday on Irish Twitter, learning a lot about their perspective. I think this is what Twitter was made for, was yesterday. And you got so many different perspectives. And I think an important perspective is to look at, while we understand, death and what that means. However, I think it's really important to look at another perspective that we don't hear as much, especially right now in Canada, as so many people are so eager to now regale the king. We're spending so many public resources and protocols. We're pausing so much government work, public engagement, so we can have official periods of mourning. Let's recognize that so many Canadians today will not be mourning.
The Queen's body right now remains at Balmoral. It'll be moved to Edinburgh on Sunday. It will lie in state, and obviously thousands and thousands of people will pay their respects. Jenny, you're a communications advisor. You help people massage and hit bullseyes with their messages. You help people ensure that their messages land. I want to get local on this for a second. I want your evaluation, your take on a statement from the mayor of our city, Edmonton's mayor, Amarjeet Sohi. This was his statement on the passing of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. Quote, "It is sad news to hear of the passing of Canada's head of state, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. I invite Edmontonians to pay their respects over the coming days to the Queen, Britain's longest-serving monarch." Is it sufficient?
Oh, well, I mean, off the heels of what Harman was just talking about, I do think that there is going to be the time for us to dive really deeply into what this means and what this has meant for so many people. But in the moment right now, I'm going to be really superficial, and I don't think it's maybe Edmonton's job to lead that conversation quite yet. I think we can blend into the, a lot of people are superficial or not. A lot of people are really upset for many different reasons, good and bad. And I think it's not really, the mayor, everything he said was totally correct. There was nothing wrong, even though it came across really harsh and a little bit cold. But I guess it just depends on who he's trying to talk to. So I just don't think it's our job to stick our neck out and start that conversation that Harman was just speaking about here in Edmonton. But I do think in the coming weeks that's definitely going to be more of a topic of conversation.
Yeah, Harman, you brought up Jagmeet Singh's comments yesterday. And I thought, first of all, I think it's perfectly fine for people to say what they think at their own peril. Like, and I guess obviously for federal political party leaders, let alone heads of state, it's a little bit different. I mean, the prime minister is essentially speaking for the people of Canada, so he's going to be a little bit more careful in his remarks. But I thought that Jagmeet Singh saying, a family has lost an elder, they've lost a grandmother, a mother, and a friend, it's true, and it's a personal angle on it, but it also says a lot, right? But I also don't think that there's a problem with that. We just got into this with Supriya. Like, is it too soon? She goes, you can't have a conversation about whether or not it's too soon with world leaders. It's different than talking about your neighbor next door that passed away suddenly and shit-talking them at the memorial service, right?
Well, it was never too soon for the British Empire to exploit the deaths of other monarchs and other heads of state. And while that sounds very cold, I don't see any issue with Sohi's statement. I see no issue with what Jagmeet Singh said. I thought they were extremely respectful. For so many Canadians, the Queen was just simply a celebrity that was part of their lives. And just like so many were kind of eulogizing her yesterday. I understand that from a celebrity perspective. She's no longer part of their lives. She was somebody that was a consistent constant for as long as they could remember. But in terms of, whether it's too soon, it is absolutely not too soon. This is the moment where I think Canadians should reckon with what it means to be a constitutional monarchy, whether that's relevant to us as a society anymore, and whether we want to continue that way. I think this is the moment.
Well, Trudeau took it to the other extreme. He's like, I'm really going to miss her. Yeah. And it was like, oh, interesting. Okay. It was very personal and very, I don't know, superficially. I like watching the Royals. I obviously don't dive deep into it. I was definitely shocked when I saw that she was going to die yesterday and died. And I can relate to all the people who are crying and upset. Obviously it comes with a ton of baggage that goes along with it, but for a moment it's just really sad. And like Jagmeet said, like, she's a family member, a grandmother. One thing that I love about her is she worked so hard. I don't know how many people that we can point out that worked as hard as her till the absolute day that she died. It's a tough job, sitting, listening, shaking hands, bringing awareness to things. I know it seems dumb and superficial, but it was a tough job, and she took it very seriously till the day she died. So, I mean, I do respect that for sure.
She was kind of like, I would compare her almost, this is maybe bizarre, but to Betty White, where like people just sort of thought that she would never die. And when she did, it didn't matter that Betty White was, on the cusp of her 100th birthday, or it doesn't matter that the Queen was 96 after decades of public service. People were still surprised that she died. And we talked with Supriya about this too. You wonder if Canadians or people around the world might reconsider or might reevaluate their connection with the monarchy, or the entire platform upon which the entire premise upon which Canada is built under a King Charles. KO, I don't know if that conversation ever goes anywhere. I don't see a lot of political will to shake the tree that significantly. But do you think more and more Canadians might have? There's obviously going to be a different connection or a different relationship with a new king.
I think the polling even before she died suggested this is about to happen. It's a dawning of a new era. She was on the throne for 70 years. So think about that. When she was 21, she took this oath to service, and for all those years has been doing it. And I think that isn't something, I think that we're not going to see that again. And Prince Charles is ushering in a completely new era where I do hope there is talk about reparations and truth and reconciliation and all of those important and very difficult conversations that need to be had about the really deep pain caused by colonialism.
Do you really think, like, under King Charles that he
I'm not saying no, but I
think he should, but I can't even see it.
But Jenny, I'm going to say that I think the polling showed before she died that they were losing just people were losing that interest in having this constitutional monarchy. So I think he's going to be forced. I don't think he's going to be I don't think people are going to really remember Charles. And I think it will be probably who knows what's going to happen to the monarchy? I think it's an open question. She really had she was a very forceful, powerful leader, quietly though. And one thing I think that is forgotten is she did take the throne in 52. Women were not large global figures at the time. And just from a gender equity perspective, it was really fascinating to watch her career over the years. She worked with 15 prime ministers, 5 popes, 12 prime ministers, was known around the world, good and bad, for many things. And so that is something I think with all of the stuff that's being talked about in the coming weeks that should be discussed, because it was a remarkable life, good and bad. And I think we have to really open those discussions. And like Harman said, good and bad, we have to have them all.
Yeah, I mean, just even the video. I mean, it's striking. She's 25 years old at this point. Her dad's just died suddenly, the youngest British monarch in history to take the throne. Here she was, KO. I think it was 1951, this video. Here it is. Let's roll it.
I declare before you all that my whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service and to the service of our great imperial family to which we all belong.
So there you have it. You had no idea what she was getting into. It struck me yesterday when I heard that our great imperial family, and just the word imperial, right? The great imperial family to which we all belong. There's probably a bunch of people going, well, speak for yourself. But I digress. I appreciate that we can have these conversations. I want to ask the three of you about a tough one. This is a story, obviously, that's, I think, broken the hearts of Canadians. Many Canadians also have very valid questions about our parole board and how dangerous criminals are released back into the general public. Obviously, all eyes on Saskatchewan over this past weekend. I don't think I need to lay out the details, but nearly 30 people either killed or wounded by brothers, and in particular by Miles Sanderson, who was wanted by police, obviously now dead after being taken into police custody earlier this week. Jenny, how are you wrapping your mind around this story? Some people are taking a look at the parole board. Some people are taking a look at, I think, a very important conversation around mental health and other supports, addiction supports and services on reserves and First Nation communities in Canada. People are talking about transparency with policing. What's an angle that you're keeping an eye on?
I don't know if it's an angle. I just think it's really sad. What's the answer? Like the mental health issues, the addiction issues, like this is something we're talking about over and over and over and over and over again. And I've never seen anyone have the answer to it, whether it's, people experiencing houselessness or, what's happening in our downtown Edmonton, what happened in Saskatchewan, how do we help? We all want to help. The conversations around helping people are happening everywhere. And I just don't know what the answer is. And so I think it's just so sad. There's problems with policing. There's problems with the parole. There's problems with the supports we have. There's problems with government funding. We don't have enough of anything. So I don't know. I'm feeling very overwhelmed as each story, kind of comes out. And this isn't necessarily, the world in which I live in every day of my life, but certainly I have clients who are constantly, we're like, hey, how do we roll up our sleeves and what do we do? And how do we stop doing things in a silo and work together? And so there is that, common energy of people who want to help. It's just a matter of what is the answer.
Harman?
This story really came onto most people's radar when the public alert system went out, across 3 provinces and brought people's attention to, what was happening. I think when we look at it at a local level, and we talk about how do we help provide supports, what do we do, to help continue our commitment to reconciliation. Well, right now, the city of Edmonton has affordable housing units that are available to be lived in, for which the province is providing no funding in the face of a $13 billion surplus. These are choices that are being made by policymakers in this province every single day. There are things that we can do and things that are on the table that are just not being done.
Let's talk. Well, KO, I want to check in with you on this, and then Harman, I want to circle back on that surplus. It'll be a nice bridge for us to walk over to start talking some provincial politics. But Catherine, I want to remind people you're the CEO of the YWCA of Edmonton. You're aware of the desperate need for social supports. Obviously, you and your team facilitate many of those supports, and I have to imagine that you view a tragedy like this and a bigger national story like this through that lens. So where are you at?
Very tragic. And I really hope, when Jenny talks about answers, there's root causes to all of this. And, intergenerational trauma, the road of truth and reconciliation, addiction, poverty, those are really things that until we truly address root causes, we won't ever start having, ever really not solving these challenges, but really addressing these challenges and being a community that truly cares about everyone, no matter who you are. So mental health and addiction, we see it in our city right now. There are massive issues. We have we have mental health supports within the YWCA. We have a long wait list. It's heartbreaking, and you could operate around the clock. And that is telling. And I think coming out of COVID, we're seeing even more folks really struggling. And I'm really concerned in the months and years to come, if we as a community don't come together and truly address these root causes, we will see more tragedies like this.
Harman, let me circle back. Province of Alberta, way bigger surplus than expected. They were looking at about $500 million, $551 million, record high, not record high, check that. Higher than expected resource revenues mean that there's a surplus of about $13 billion. The government's plan at this point, says Finance Minister Jason Nixon in Alberta, is going to be to squirrel some away into the Heritage Savings Trust Fund to pay down some of Alberta's more recent debt. I thought that it was a relatively prudent move. I asked Real Talkers what they thought about it. Many people making very good points about restoring funding to seniors and other mental health supports, supervised consumption services. People are talking about harm reduction, better supporting education and health care, cutting down class sizes, providing educational assistance. Everybody has ideas on how they could easily spend $13 billion. What do you think is the right way to do it?
You know, you watch the current UCP leadership race. We're kind of entering the final stages, and almost every candidate and contender is talking about re-indexing AISH. Many of whom were cabinet ministers in the government that decided that they wanted to de-index AISH. And I find it, problematic that so many of these individuals who now find a voice for the marginalized and vulnerable in this province didn't do so when they actually were there and had access to the levers of power. And so to me, that's the part that, when we talk about, well, what are the plans? Let's look forward of what this government will look like potentially after this leadership race. I think most people are predicting that Daniel Smith will win and become leader. Do I have any confidence that this government will be allocating those funds towards the most vulnerable of this province? Absolutely not. And so if the alternative is to now, put that into some savings and paying down the debt, fine. I guess that's going to be the path forward. In my opinion, I think this was an opportunity to address some of those significant issues, things like access to justice. We've got lawyers on strike, circling the courthouse because, we haven't been adequately funding legal aid. It's a challenge in this province that has existed forever. The NDP did not adequately address it. Previous governments didn't adequately address it, and there was a moment to do so. And that's a huge challenge for so many, is a barrier to adequate and access to justice. We can talk about it all day. Yesterday, the court was more occupied with changing its name from the Court of Queen's Bench to the Court of King's Bench, while we have people who can't actually get access to justice. Our priorities in this province and in this country need to focus on the people who are vulnerable and marginalized.
Jenny, you have a heart out in 1 minute, so I want to give you a chance to chime in on this. $13 billion, it's an opportunity for a government to achieve some priorities, to right some wrongs, to set a tone for a future election. Here's what we did with the money that we saved by cutting spending. That'll be the government's message. That'll be the Conservatives' message next time they head into election. What would you advise them to do, or what would you do with the surplus?
Well, I never understand not funding AISH. Like, the headline is so bad, always when they say, well, we're not going to increase AISH spending, like, why not? Like, why not just do it? Take care of those on AISH, take care of our vulnerable, take care of our seniors. But what I will say is this government is investing in some areas. They're making a significant investment this year in updating their affordable housing allocation here in Edmonton and area. Significant amount, but I do know that. And so it's like they are making investments in pockets. But again, when is they could give all the money in the world to mental health supports, and it's still not going to be enough. So I don't know what the answers are. I do agree in savings. I don't, this cut up, down. So let's actually put money in the bank. That's something that all governments have said. Here, we never save any money. So yes, let's save some money. And let's take a step back and not decide in a whim in the middle of inflation and all this stuff what we're going to spend it on, but let's be really smart about it. And let's make big impact. And let's not just look at what the government can do. Let's bring in other people too. It's not just up to the government to solve all the problems. We need to be working more collectively together. And I think a government that works with partnerships and industry and organizations and collaborations, let's look outside of what one level can do. For example, the city of Edmonton, here we spent $75 million on 200 and however many affordable housing units, 216 or whatever. A developer could build hundreds more for $75 million, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds more. So why is the city bragging about that? There was an opportunity to do so much more, but are we having the conversations with the right people and the developers who want to help? Because they do want to help. It's just, let's take these barriers down and start working together on it.
Jenny, thanks for shuffling your schedule to make yourself available this morning. We really appreciate it. That's Jenny Adams, principal of the Adams Agency. Harman, KO, do you have a few more minutes to stick around? I want to talk to you about the Conservative leadership race, the federal one.
Sure.
Okay. Let me ask you this. For context, I want to let our audience members know, if you didn't know already, both Harman and Catherine ran in past as candidates for the provincial Progressive Conservatives. Of course, KO was the past president of the PC Association of Alberta. Now, the federal party, of course, is going to be making its leadership announcement tomorrow in probably the least exciting leadership race in recent memory. It doesn't feel like it's been close. I think it's fair to say everybody would be absolutely gobsmacked if Pierre Poilievre didn't run away with this thing. At risk of winding up with egg on my face, let's assume that Pierre Poilievre is the new leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. What does this mean for the federal political landscape moving forward? KO, you first.
Well, we're definitely going to see a lot. It's going to be a lot more. I'm just trying to be charitable here, so I'm trying to do the right words here. But we're going to see a lot more fighting, I think. A lot more. Pierre Poilievre is clearly a political fighter. And is a very strong communicator, and has shown that through this leadership race. And, politics aside, he just is able to capture the public's attention. What's been so interesting about his campaign is he really has just absolutely not done anything with the mainstream media and just gone directly to social media and really been talking to folks that way, and has really done, his numbers don't lie. The fact that his message just seems to be resonating with a lot of folks. I think when we come out of this leadership race, the Liberals, I think they've been slow to react to him. And so we're going to see what their reaction is going to be to him heading into the next election, and how they're going to challenge someone like him, because compared to O'Toole, he's just a completely different political force. And if he taps into the right thing, he will be very hard. He could be, it will be a very contentious and competitive election. So super interesting times. But, it's been so disappointing to me. And Harman will talk about this too. And it's very much like the race that's going on in Alberta right now. It's really about grievance politics, and it's all like silly things and talking about COVID and all the bad stuff. And no one's sitting down and saying, what does our country, our province look post-COVID? What are we going to dream about again? How are we going to build, a new society coming out of COVID? And two very lost opportunities for both of these races. And it's super depressing because of all of the challenges we face, but also all the opportunities that have arisen as well.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Harman, what do you think?
I was a bit surprised that the Conservative Party is going to be a bit muted over the weekend, given that I understood that a huge proportion of Pierre Poilievre supporters had replaced the late Queen Elizabeth with Queen Didulo from QAnon. So it was a bit surprising. I mean, this has been a tainted process ever since Patrick Brown was disqualified. Somewhere in this country, the rise of the next leftist populist leader is happening, which will balance out Pierre Poilievre and what we see there, and that's going to be the really exciting thing moving forward, because Pierre is doing what a lot of us were predicting a few years ago when we saw the rise of Donald Trump. Understood that Canada was not going to be immune from that type of politics and rhetoric. But, where comes the next Bernie Sanders, I think, is one of the pressing questions for a lot of political watchers. Jagmeet Singh definitely seems like he's running out the clock on his time. I'm surprised that Justin Trudeau is going to come back and contest the next election as leader. I think most expectations were that, if he stepped down, he gave his party an opportunity for a refresh. After 10 years, his brand is fairly exhausted. The Sunny Ways brand is now the past. It's pretty obvious that, there's a big backlash against that. People want decisiveness. They want leaders who can represent that. Whether that's, and I think KO hit it best. I mean, what people know about Pierre Poilievre in this past 2 years is he's a fighter. Beyond that, there's not much substance. This is a guy who's peddled dangerous fiscal and monetary policy in terms of promoting crypto. But does that really matter? Not really, because people want someone who's going to stand up for them. And that is what they're looking for in a political leader. They don't see it in Justin Trudeau, and they don't see it in Jagmeet Singh. So how the NDP and the Liberals react to projecting leadership candidates or someone moving forward will be really critical in terms of whether they want to have a chance next election.
Harman Kandola and Katherine O'Neill, both members of the Real Talk editorial board. To the both of you, it was great to see you in person a while ago. I'm excited to let you know that a week today, we will be officially announcing the inaugural recipient of the Real Talk Julie Rohr Scholarship, and she's going to join me here on the show. We're so excited for that. Katherine is the CEO of the YWCA of Edmonton. Harman is a lawyer at SB LLP and VP of the World Sikh Organization. To both of you, thanks for your time. To Jenny as well.
Happy Friday. Have a great day.
Thank you, Jess.
You bet, friends. We'll talk to you again soon. And thanks for your kind comments, Real Talkers. I love the group chat roundtable. We bring it to you a couple of times a year, and it's a way for me to just, first of all, present to you people whose perspectives I respect, people who keep my edges sharp, so to speak, and people who have had a meaningful role in me developing my own thoughts and opinions. I hope that they have the same impact on you, whether you agree with them or not. That's really rarely the point. That's our group chat roundtable. If you want to follow those three on Twitter, you can find them from the post that we push out from our official account, Real Talk RJ. You can find us on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter as well. Thanks to everybody that gives us a follow. And if you like what you're hearing, if you're watching on YouTube, give us a like. Smash that like button. Subscribe. Tell your friends about it. And, of course, on the podcast as well. If you're listening right now on your phone, walking the dogs, it's easy. Just hit share, and you can send this podcast, that roundtable, our interview with Supriya, what have you, anywhere you like. The conversations happen because of sponsors that in many cases have been our ride or dies. That's Park Power since the very beginning. They said, we want to power your hashtag. We want to make sure these conversations happen. So they are there, the friendly local utilities provider that more and more Real Talkers are going to for their internet, electricity, and natural gas. Now more than ever, I think literally more than ever, with inflation where it's going right now, with the interest rates reflecting that inflation, cost of living's up, and people are trying to trim their budgets. Your number one place to begin should be visiting parkpower.ca to compare rates. What are you paying right now for internet, electricity, natural gas? What would you be paying with them if you bundle your services? Never mind the $70 off your first bill. That's a nice one. Buy your family dinner with it or put it in the bank. The promo code 2022-REALTALK gets you $70 off your first bill at parkpower.ca. And it's a perfect weekend to check out the new lineup at Dairy Queen. I was telling you about the summer blizzard lineup. We're getting super excited about all of them. Well, John, I'm happy to let you know that everybody that gets really enthusiastic about the fall offerings, there it is, the pumpkin pie blizzard treat is now available at the Dairy Queens of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park. Calling all fall weather fans, the fall favorite is back. It's real pumpkin pie pieces in there. They're not messing around. Garnished with whipped topping and nutmeg. It's a classic favorite at the Dairy Queens of Palisades, Nemeo, Newcastle, Westmount, and Baseline Road. And you let them know that Real Talk sent you there. When you pass through that drive-thru and you see them at the counter, they always love knowing who's checking in from the Real Talk audience. Every Friday, our friends at Local Environmental Services give us a chance to blow off a little steam, to say what we might not say otherwise. What I mean by that is you write us real emails, and I read them, sometimes with apologies, but rarely. This one especially not for kids. We're going to get to Gerry's take in just a second. It's a tradition we call Trash Talk! All right, this from Trent, who says, I am thoroughly disgusted with how the United Conservative Party in Alberta is breaking democratic norms. They got voted in based on a platform of jobs, economy, pipelines. And then they do these underhanded things like switching their mandate to include results from some rigged fair deal panel that was not voted on by Albertans, changing their leader with the potential to implement an entirely new mandate once that new leader's chosen, again, not voted on by everyday Albertans. The Sovereignty Act? Come on, says Trent. Albertans didn't vote for any of this. Enough with the dirty tricks. Trent says call a freaking election as soon as that new leader's selected and allow Albertans to vote on a path forward. How is it that a few thousand party members can now decide what happens in Alberta before the next election? This should be illegal. We need to stop the madness. That from Trent. And this one from Gerry, who says, I'm sure that there was a solid representation of real talkers at Edmonton's Commonwealth Stadium this past Sunday for what was one of the most epic displays of rock god talent we've ever seen. I'm talking Joan Jett. I'm talking Poison. I'm talking Def Leppard. It was also one of the most epic displays of embarrassing, out-of-touch, vulgar objectionism by one of music's loudest degenerates, Motley Crue. He says, we instantly had flashbacks to a show we'd seen of this band years ago. Now they're pushing 60 years of age, and here's this group of scantily clad young women, sexy strip teasing on stage, a camera guy oogling angles for these huge screens. We had high hopes. We hoped maybe Motley Crue was beyond all the spectacle, but no. Tommy had his moments again, Tommy Lee, talking about getting drunk, putting up dick pics on the net again. You want to see it? You've seen it 1,000 times, he said, but you know what I haven't seen? Titties! Get them out, girls! Let's go, yeah! And of course, the camera guy found a few obliging ladies in the crowd willing to feed this horrible moment. But we looked around. So many kids in the audience. Young, impressionable girls and boys. So many young people in their teens and their 20s and their 30s all getting a taste of what we had hoped was in the past. A dirty, tasteless era of objectifying and sexualizing and degrading women. It was so gross, absolutely disgusting, and we're angry that they're still doing this. You know, the crowd had a different reaction than the last show I was at, says Gerry, with many starting to leave. He says, I never leave concerts early, but fuck Motley Crue. How could they not just be a little better? How? After Me Too, after Harvey Weinstein, after Bill Cosby, after these culture-shifting moments, could they not just be a little bit better? I can't explain it. All I know is we've never left a concert early along with so many others, with the group feeling dejected instead of euphoric. So Motley Crue, says Gerry, grow the fuck up. Maybe donate some money to advancing equality and education. Maybe have conversations with survivors of abuse. Maybe even ones you've wronged in the past. Try to make the world a better place. Maybe one day you'd be able to look into the mirror and feel proud, but it sure wouldn't be after this weekend at Commonwealth Stadium. Signs off, Gerry. Peace and love! You can send us your trash talk to talk@ryanjesperson.com, presented by our friends at Local Environmental Services. You can check them out online today across Alberta and Saskatchewan. Keeping it local, still family owned after more than 25 years. Monday, we're back at it with the stories leading the headlines and the ones we're not talking about but need to. You inform our editorial direction. Be in touch with the show every time. Have a fantastic weekend, my friends. Keep it safe, keep it between the lines, and we'll chat soon.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jesperson. Executive producer Josh Dunford. Technical producer John Hicks. General manager Katie Cook-Chivers. Account coordinator Lawrence Derlego. Human resources Lena Shepard. Website design Mike Johnston. Voiceover by me, Carrie Skelton. Real Talk's editorial board is Supriya Dwivedi, Ahmed Ali, Randy Morin, Ann Castleman, Corey Hogan, Harman Kandola, Katherine O'Neill, and Chris Henderson. Member Emerita, Julie Rohr. Real Talk is recorded in Edmonton, Alberta on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux, home to the Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta. Real Talk is a relay project. For more, check out ryanjesperson.com.